Indeed, God is present here and now, as in everywhere and every when. But in the acknowledgement of God's presence, let us pray. Father, Mother God, we give thanks for this opportunity to be open to the awareness of your presence. As we reside in that quiet space, that place within in which the holy occurs. We feel your loving embrace. We feel your expansive and infinite supply of love streaming through us. And then as we realize the healing presence of your love, as we feel it transforming us at the cellular level, at the thought level, we acknowledge that we are your channels of this love into this world. And we accept that responsibility. We offer that love unconditionally here in this moment. We allow that love to touch everyone in this moment. Those with whom we agree, those with whom we disagree. Those who believe as we do and those who do not believe as we do. For those who live a lifestyle that is compatible with ours and those who do not, we offer your love unconditionally in this moment. And for this opportunity to practice the expression of your unconditional love, we give thanks. And so it is that together we say, Amen. Well, standing on the shoulders of survivors. Memorial Day weekend. We recognize that Memorial Day is a holiday where we acknowledge the sacrifice that those who have gone to war and have not returned have offered to us, to our culture, to our society, to our country. And it's interesting that the official birthplace, the quote official birthplace of Memorial Day is in New York. But the true place of the origin of Memorial Day was actually in Charleston, South Carolina. How many of you know this? Okay, all right. Well, there will be an education here for some of you. The freed slaves, in acknowledging the sacrifice that was provided to them by the Union soldiers that were imprisoned in the racetrack in Charleston, South Carolina, many of whom died from disease and from injuries sustained in the war. They gathered together, 10,000 strong, 26 days after the surrender of the last rebel army by General Lee in Appomattox. They gathered at that racetrack, 10,000 strong, to march around the track in tribute to the fallen soldiers that were imprisoned at the Charleston Racecourse. I'm not sure why that has not been officially acknowledged, but the freed slaves of Charleston, South Carolina, and the surrounding area came together to memorialize those fallen soldiers. So it was in 1865 that we began the celebration. It was not until 1868 that it was recognized as a national holiday, and here we are on the, it was originally the, let's see, what was it? It was the, recognized on the 26th of May, maybe, but then it became a three-day holiday for federal workers in 1968. So here we are in the last Monday of May. So, happy Memorial Day? Anyway, Memorial Day has, in some parts of the country, I know my family was very much into the recognition of the ancestors, not just the fallen war dead, but the recognition of the ancestors. How many of you, of your families, were recognizing your ancestors on that day? Yeah, I'm from northeastern Missouri, and that was, I mean, the cemeteries are around our parts, these parts. The cemeteries were festooned with bouquets, some real, some artificial, but they were flowers on many of the grave sites. So not just the war dead, but rather the ancestors. And it is a tribute to the ancestors that we are here today, right? I mean, our ancestors survived at least to the age of reproduction. And it is for that reason that we walk this planet. So we acknowledge and celebrate the success of our ancestors in their reproduction. Then we have the tribute to the ancestors. Oftentimes that tribute is manifested in our relying upon the values and the traditions that have been handed down through our families. And so we often consider the tribute to the ancestors to be best expressed through upholding those traditions. And we see that also in society, that there is a continual cultural imperative that we maintain our traditions and our values as a society. In some societies, that harkens back to support of the Constitution, right? Our laws are based upon that foundation of the Constitution. But we often implore those who step outside the realm of accepted values, we implore them to step back inside because we want to maintain our set of values in this society. The interesting thing is that the insistence upon the maintenance of the values and traditions that are in our culture are not allowing the culture to advance. For instance, shortly after the implementation of the laws of the land based upon the Constitution, there were laws that were put in place to ensure that slavery was continued. And in fact, there was a provision in the Constitution, many scholars think, and I'm not a constitutional scholar, nor do I play one on TV, but there is argument that the state militias were really the establishment of the state militias and support of state militias through the Second Amendment were part of the package of accommodation to the slave states so that they could require the northern states to capture and return the escaped slaves from the south. So we have parts of our culture have had these little barbs of values that have been insisted upon for a time. And when slavery was finally made illegal, we transformed in that aspect of our culture. So there is, within a culture, there is an imperative to maintain the values, but at the same time to evolve. And sometimes the maintenance of the values are an impediment to the cultural evolution. Well, that also goes for our spiritual traditions. As we look upon the teachings that are offered to us by Jesus in, wait a minute, I'll get to that. This is an example of the imperative that was handed down, was established in the 4th century and handed down to subsequent generations to say, this is what we believe. I'm not saying that's what I believe, but they say this is what we are to believe. And many of the traditions, many of the Christian traditions rely upon this as being, if you will, their constitution. It is this Nicene Creed and a similar Apostles' Creed, but the creed that was established by the early church fathers was its intention was to assure that there would be no migration of belief from that foundation. And what I'd like to offer you today is some reasons why this is no longer appropriate for us. Now, you may believe this, and that is absolutely perfect and appropriate. But there are those within our society who do not hold to this any longer and have a challenge, at least within their own consciousness. They have a challenge to remain in those spiritual traditions that insist upon this as the belief. And so the insistence upon this as a belief disallows any evolution of belief. And when we look at this as being established in the 4th century, and we look at the things that we know about today, and the progress that we have made both in technology, string of satellites across the sky, as well as our understanding of the basic workings of our bodies, the workings of our minds, the workings of our society. This is an ample opportunity for us to reconsider those basic beliefs that we have and say, are they working in today's culture? Are they working in today's situation? Are they working in our present social structure? Well, an offering that is given to us by Jesus is, I'll come back to that here in just a moment, is in John 16, 12 to 13. And in this passage, Jesus is saying that I still have many things to say to you, but you cannot bear them now. When the Spirit of truth comes, he will guide you into all the truth. For he will not speak on his own, but will speak whatever he hears, and he will declare to you the things that are to come. The implication is that he will speak to you the things that he hears from the Godhead, from the all that is all, and he will declare those things to you as he hears them. Now, what this means to me, well, first of all, this is from John, acknowledging that John was written some 70 plus years after the crucifixion of Jesus, was probably, very likely, not written by someone who was a witness to the teachings of Jesus, but rather was a participant in the school of thought that arose out of the teachings of Jesus. And acknowledging that indeed that is therefore secondhand, but we offer that this quote may in fact be valid. And if this quote is valid, what that means to me is that as we evolve, as our situation expands, as our understanding deepens, as we gain a greater clarity of the reality in which we live, we must be willing to listen to that guide within for additional instructions on what this all means. And I have many things to say to you, but you cannot bear to hear them now. If Jesus was speaking these words, assuming that these words are an accurate reflection of what he spoke, if he was speaking these words, he would be speaking them to an audience that still believed that there was a God sitting up there in the heavens, behind that dome that encompassed the sky, in which pinpricks were allowing the light of God to shine through at night, hence stars, the twinkling of which were caused by the dancing of angels behind those pinpricks. So this is the world view, this is the heaven view that the audience that Jesus was speaking to. And if Jesus was in fact the enlightened being that we think he was, that at least I think he was, he would need to offer his truth in the context of his audience, for his audience to be able to absorb the gems of truth that he could offer in their present understanding of reality. So I still have many things to say to you, but you cannot bear them now. It indicates to me that what he was saying was that truth is a little bit more than you might imagine. Truth is a little bit more expansive than you might understand. Truth is really a way of connecting to reality as we will come to know it, as we will come to know it. And we may not even be there yet. So it is important for us to keep an open mind about what is true. We look at the Nicene Creed, and I offer to you that the Nicene Creed is not in accordance with this. The Nicene Creed is trying to concretize the state of belief, the state of understanding, and the state of perspective of what the world reality was in the 4th century. And the 4th century understanding is far different than our understanding today. We do not see heaven as a dome that has holes in it in which the light of God shines through. Rather, we see those pinpricks in the sky through such technology as the Gaia satellite, which is actually tracking over 1 billion stars and their movement through the sky. That just blows me away. But that satellite is recording the movement of stars as they move in their individual paths through the galaxy. That technology could not have possibly been understood, could not have possibly been acknowledged even a century ago. So we are in a place now that we have a flood of incoming data, that we have this influx of input that we are having to accommodate. Well, we may have to accommodate if we're paying attention. That we need to realize that our understanding is something that will evolve. As we look at, for instance, the evolution of New Thought. And by the way, if you don't have one of these, we have more available for you. But on the interior of this brochure is this diagram. And the intention of this is to acknowledge that unity did not spring forth from the mind of one individual. Unity sprung forth from the teachings of Jesus over here, from the teachings of philosophers and theologians over here, such as Socrates, even pre-Socratic thought, that we have come together through a series of significant New Thought teachers here and expressed through these New Thought organizations. So unity being one of those New Thought organizations is an expression, the teachings are an expression primarily of Charles and Myrtle Fillmore here. But Emily Cady is also involved in that, as well as all of the others that precede. So unity is, as Ernest Holmes, who is the founder of Religious Science, or now Centers for Spiritual Living, as Ernest Holmes indicated in his writings, we must remain open at the top. The point is that we cannot close ourselves off from the reality of what we are understanding the reality to be today, but rather we must be willing to accommodate these new ideas, these new understandings into our belief structure. And so it is that New Thought has emerged from a vast population of teachers. Now, there are those within Unity who deride the opportunity to acknowledge new teachings. For instance, A Course in Miracles is not shown on this chart. But A Course in Miracles is a very significant body of teaching that supplements is really the wrong word, but it expands. Yes, it expands the teachings that have come to us from the founders of Unity and the predecessors. A Course in Miracles is it's not just a body of teaching, but it's also a recipe of practice that allows us on a day-to-day basis to build a greater understanding of who we are in this extraordinary cosmos of beings that we are a member of. It is also not the only supplemental teaching. That's not the only expansive teaching. Within the Unity movement, Howard Caesar, who was a minister, retired about a year ago, minister of Unity of Houston, there were people within the Unity movement that were giving him a hard time because he chose to go to India to study under a guru in India that spoke of the oneness teaching. And so there were a number of people within Unity that said, "Oh no, that's the work of the devil." That's a paraphrase, and it wasn't really. Not many people in Unity believe in the devil, but they looked at Howard Caesar's divergence from the accepted, quote unquote, the accepted path, and they said, "What are you doing? You're wasting your congregation's money in going to India to study under this guru." But he did it anyway. And I celebrate those within Unity who say, this is wonderful. This is a great body of teaching, and it's not all there is. It's not all there is. There's a whole vast array, universe of teachings and many teachers that have something to offer to us individually to understand who we are in this complex of relationships with the divine. So, my point today is not to celebrate the fixed body of teachings that Unity offers, but rather to celebrate the openness with which Unity was founded. Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, in their initial intention, was to just be an education system that people from other churches would come to gain a greater facility with what Jesus originally taught, as opposed to the Nicene Creed, which concretized and insisted upon adherence to that 4th century set of beliefs. So Unity is also, let me rephrase that, many of the students of Unity are also open at the top. And I celebrate those that are open at the top. In fact, I will go so far as to say this. You should not accept anything I say as absolute truth. Whatever propositions I offer are for your consideration, and if they seem reasonable, for your testing of them in the laboratory of your experience. While I may from time to time seem certain of what I say, I reserve the right to change my mind as my experience reveals to me a more valid truth. I was one of those who derided Howard Caesar for his divergence from the unity path. Until I said, wait a minute. What am I doing? That's not appropriate. That's not truly what I believe, because I reserve the right to change my mind as my experience reveals to me a more valid truth. But whatever truth I arrive at is only my truth. The Christ dwelling in each of you, by whatever name you choose to offer, will reveal your truth. I only ask that you allow yourself the privilege of changing your mind when your experience and the Christ in you reveals a new truth to you. We each have within us a wellspring of wisdom ready to be nurtured and expressed. Every one of us is a teacher. Every one of us is a student. And if we pay attention to the student side of us, we can be more effective in the teacher side of us. If we are willing to say, I am open to a new truth. I am open to what this experience is going to reveal to me. I am open to this idea that is offered to me. I'll put it into my laboratory of my experience, and I'll see if it works. And if it works, then it is my idea. It is mine, and I own it. I acknowledge it, and I can either practice it or not practice it, but I can pay attention to whether or not that particular truth is a valid truth for me. So while we acknowledge the value of our spiritual ancestors, it is important also to recognize that we are individuals that have our own opportunity to learn the truth of who we are. And that's our choice. We can either rely upon our lifelong experiences and say, well, that's all well and good. That's fine. I'll just hold that. I'll just believe that. That's fine. That's fine if that works for you. But I'm encouraging you to remain open at the top. I'm encouraging you to look around you, to pay attention, to keep your student hat on so that you can be a more effective teacher. We'll have our meditation. As we come into our meditation, let us come in with, I cast all my cares. Take a deep breath. Bring it all the way up under your shoulder blades, under your collarbone, and let it flow out all the way down to your belly button. Several deep cleansing breaths, setting aside the concerns about what to have for lunch, setting aside the conflict that you encountered this week, allowing this moment, this breathing moment, to be pristine, unencumbered, open. And in this moment, we allow our hearts to open and to be the conduit of God's love, moving through us, healing us, and expressing from us into this moment, unconditionally. And in this moment of open-mindedness, we allow ourselves to reconsider those things that seem to not be working for us. We allow ourselves to question what it is we believe. We allow ourselves to acknowledge that we don't know it all. We allow ourselves in this moment to be receptive to new insights. Breathing in and breathing out. We set aside our agenda and just be. As we realize that as we open ourselves to the flow of God's love, we also open ourselves to receiving the wisdom that is offered to us from this universal consciousness. We allow ourselves to be students in this wonderful classroom of life. We allow ourselves permission to reach out, to touch, to empathize, to be compassionate. We allow ourselves to be students in this moment. And we empower ourselves to be teachers through our actions, through our thoughts, through our words, and through our silence. Breathing in and breathing out, we come back into this time and space, celebrating this moment with hallelujah. And we'll take an offering for unity now. As we take our offerings in our hands, let us bless them with this offering statement. Together, please. Divine love, through me, blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. I give in love because I trust in God. And once again, Patty Jackson and Irreverence.